It is officially time to panic when it comes to Miami Dolphins running back De'Von Achane. We'll explain why on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. You can also read her at Behind the Steel Curtain and Pro Football Focus. And it's a Wednesday show, so of course that means Matt Williamson is here. Check him out on Twitter at WilliamsonNFL. Go check out his new YouTube channel as well. We're going to be answering your mailbag questions, including what's going to happen with Rashee Rice, who is your favorite offseason buy at the quarterback position. But I want to start with this question from Jack. He wants to know, is it time to panic when it comes to Miami Dolphins running back De'Von Achane? Matt, why don't you go first?
Well, I think this is how Miami looks at it, as we have to have an obscenely fast running back in the backfield for every snap we ever take on offense, no matter what. And we understand that Achane can't be that guy, that he is a limited snap count player without question. And that keeps him as efficient as possible. And I'm not even suggesting he will be as obscenely efficient this upcoming year or for his career as he was last year. I mean, I don't know that he's going to average 6 yards a carry or whatever. So I think the draft pick is just a direct replacement, heir apparent to Mostert, who is an older guy. I think he's one of the absolute oldest running backs that's currently employed at the moment, who also probably won't score a ridiculous number of touchdowns. And I think Wright's going to need a little time. I mean, that's a really strange Tennessee offense. Go back to the Hendon Hooker coming out situation. He ran against a ton of 5-man boxes, let alone 6 and 7-man boxes. So I'm expecting somewhat of a redshirt year for Wright. And then he moves in the Mostert role at some point. Maybe it's week 10, maybe it's next year, whatever. And Achane basically is unfazed. So if you're in on him, I think you remain in on him and his usage won't change one bit.
Kate.
See, I could not come into this with a more different perspective. And
Nice.
For context, I have always been out on Achane at his price. Now, heading into the month of April, obviously this was before the Jaylen Wright selection. Achane was being drafted as the RB7 in Dynasty startup drafts. RB7. That's a top 10 pick for a guy who exceeded 50% of the snaps, 4 times in all of the 2023 season. He's a small guy, obviously very fast. That's not his problem, but 5'9", 188 pounds. That was part of the concern about him being drafted in the first place, right? And then he comes out in his rookie season. He missed, 2 games due to injury in his final season at his final season, then comes into this season, ends up getting a shoulder injury in the preseason. That forces him to miss a game. Then he has the knee injury. That forces him to miss time. I look at all of this in this culmination of yes, Miami Dolphins want speed on every single down. But Matt, to your point, if he fills the Raheem Mostert role, that is the RB1 position. And I totally had the same concerns about how does this Tennessee offense translate to the NFL. I thought he had a lot to learn in terms of mastering the vision, right? Because he's never really been asked to see the holes. They've just kind of always been there. 4 total snaps against 8+ man boxes this past season. 4 total rush attempts. That doesn't translate. But you know what offense it does translate kind of closely to is the Miami Dolphins. So kind of an ideal fit, especially considering their plethora of wide receivers. I think this was an ideal landing spot for Jaylen Wright. I think he offers the size and more of a 3-down skill set than we're going to find for Achane. And I've always looked at Achane as this guy who is going to be, in the mix for a 200-yard, 2-touchdown game any week, but one that you really can't even count on like RB1, low-end RB1 production. Like he's going to be a volatile asset. This magnifies that tenfold for me.
I'm staying out of the way, Matt. Your rebuttal.
I will easily concede that he is a volatile asset. There's no question about that.
How do you draft a volatile asset as a top 10 dynasty running back? And again, that's pre-draft. So but I don't think anybody's necessarily overreacting to Jaylen Wright specifically, but how highly can I feel like it's really hard to justify early picks on running backs, period, in dynasty. How do you invest that high a pick in an asset that, by your own admission, is quite volatile?
See, that's a different question to me. I don't know that he would end up on my team often in a startup because I don't love these top 10 backs. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of backs here that I just wouldn't invest in that neighborhood overall. And this is kind of a side note, but it's something we talk about a ton on Peacock and Williamson. Like I love the Dolphins in September and October, but they fail to realize that Buffalo and New England and the Jets are all in their division, and it eventually gets cold in the league and speed doesn't translate in the playoffs. Like they have to have home. They're built with such hubris that they have to have home field advantage, in my opinion, to get to the Super Bowl. And I think that's a faulty way. Like I described it yesterday. We broke down the AFC East, and I said, it's like they eat dessert for dinner. Like draft a guard. You don't have to draft everyone that runs a 4-2, like draft a defensive tackle that can stop the run, So the Dolphins in general to me are sell them around Halloween anyway, but my point on Achane is my stock, whatever it was 2 weeks ago, didn't change on him.
So let me ask you this, Matt. So right now he's being drafted again. This is some older ADP as RB7. I just want to name some running backs that are going behind him, and you tell me whether you would rather have Achane or some of these guys. So first one is Travis Etienne.
I'm not a believer in him either. Like I don't like the running backs in this neighborhood is the problem. So
right,
I'll
take it. So you're just gambling on the speed and the athleticism and the better offense. Is that fair?
And he's going to win me at least 2 weeks of the year. Maybe 5.
Okay. Saquon Barkley.
I would probably go Barkley in the new landing spot. I think he's probably being undervalued. Yeah.
The next group of running backs is really gross, and I have a hard time taking any of these guys over Achane. It's Rashad White, Kenneth Walker, Josh Jacobs, Isaiah Pacheco.
No.
Kate, what are your thoughts?
Yes.
Really
all of those
guys. Wow. But here's the thing. So I similarly dislike this area of running backs. I think you either need one of these top 3 or 4 guys, a Jahmyr Gibbs, a Breece Hall, a Bijan Robinson, or I think this is like a great place to trade some of these sort of mid-range running backs that I don't necessarily know have a ton of long-term value and break them into a few of these like potential dart throws, like Tony Pollard being valued as RB24, despite getting a massive contract with a Tennessee Titans offense that I think is very much on the upswing. Like give me Tony Pollard, I'll trade De'Von Achane for a Tony Pollard plus any day of the week. But this is one of those times where I'm just going to pivot to a different position. If I can unload Achane for one of these mid-range wide receivers, maybe a Drake London, maybe a Brandon Ayuk, a Nico Collins. Like I would love to turn Achane into a guy that I think is going to offer just as much upside, but I think more consistency. And that's the point. I don't want him on my team. I think he's unjustifiably high valued. And I don't think there's any scenario where I can picture him taking on a 3-down role. And I think with that kind of draft capital and dynasty, you need a 3-down role. Like I can't bank on breakaway runs for every single play because that might run out fast, especially if he can't stay healthy.
So, Kate, quick question. If you inherited an orphan team with Achane on it, he'd be your first guy to move. Like, I can't imagine him ever landing on your team now.
Mm-mm.
But if you inherited him, he's out.
He's absolutely out because he is a guy that, again, I don't think anybody's necessarily panicking about the Jaylen Wright pick. To me, it's just kind of a reinforcement of the belief that the Dolphins don't view him as an every down running back, which I don't think would surprise anybody. But yeah, he'd be the first guy I can move, because if you're telling me, even if I can get top 12 value out of him at the position and maybe swap that for a wide receiver, a star tight end, I'm going to do that all day, because I think that's going to have a lot more long-term value and stability for my roster than Achane, who, yeah, he might win me a couple weeks, but like, so could a lot of guys in that range at other positions. So I don't know.
This is fantastic news for me personally, as I'm drafting right behind Kate in a dynasty league right now. So this is great. I'm glad I know I'm going to be able to get Achane at a discounted price. So thank you so much, Kate. I appreciate it. All right, we've got more mailbag questions, including what's going to happen with Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver Rashee Rice. We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and in the NHL. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. The NBA playoffs have been absolutely fantastic. And so have the NHL. I really enjoyed watching some of those games last night come down to the last shot on goal. It's been absolutely amazing. But also go check out the FanDuel lines right now for the NFL. We have win totals up. There's futures odds. There's awards when it comes to the MVP, comeback player of the year. So much good NFL content up on FanDuel right now. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Are you having to turn down the volume because of all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that unnecessary screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, our next question comes in from John. He wants to know, what should I do with Rashee Rice in my dynasty leagues? Just to recap here, on April 10th, the Dallas police issued an arrest warrant for Rashee Rice on several charges, including because of the car accident that he had a couple weeks prior. And then yesterday, we got some news that the Dallas police have announced that Rashee Rice is under investigation for allegedly hitting a photographer at a club, I believe on Monday morning. I think it was what the timeline was there. We'll see what the league decides to do here. But Matt, what are you doing with Rashee Rice?
Probably buying or holding. I mean, I think that it's a tough one because injuries and legal stuff are always my gray areas. They're my blind spots because I know that I don't know. But I do think that the Chiefs are probably the most forgiving team in the league, or lenient team in the league. They moved on from Kareem Hunt, but a lot of their stars, including Tyreek Hill, they had no hesitation drafting where other teams wouldn't have touched them. And I think the key on the field for Rice isn't Worthy or Marquise Brown. I think he's closer to Kelsey than he is those guys. And I think he'll run a lot of Kelsey routes next year, assuming Kelsey doesn't return, but that might be a big assumption. So I think it's a buy low opportunity. You might regret it, but if I own him, I'm holding him.
Kate, what about you?
I think this is a perfect buy now opportunity. Now, I understand maybe heading into the draft with these legal questions, kind of hard to buy in, but this is dynasty we're talking about. This is not redraft. And Rashee Rice is a guy that we saw his ADP climb astronomically over the course of the season. Marcus, ahead of 2023, he was one of our favorite buy candidates all throughout his rookie process. And it paid off in a big way. I think he became Patrick Mahomes' BFF. And I think you're right, Matt. Like, in terms of the types of routes he's running, I think he's going to run a lot of these very, like, find the soft spot in the zone and, use Patrick Mahomes' ability to find that soft spot in the zone, with two hands over his eyelids. Like, I think that's the role he plays, as opposed to a perimeter role. You're going to maximize the yards after the catch. And regardless of how this situation plays out legally, I just think the price is a little bit too tantalizing. In one of my dynasty leagues just last night, there was a straight up swap, Rashee Rice for Quentin Johnston, Los Angeles Chargers.
Wow.
Bust rookie who, had pretty much every opportunity as a rookie and floundered it, completely floundered it. And, failed to get a lot of separation, didn't have a ton of reliability in terms of his hands. Yeah, I think Rashee Rice's long-term perspective is still a more positive outlook, depending on how this legal stuff shakes out. I think the upside is there. I think there's a pretty safe floor for Rashee Rice as well. Like, Marquise Brown, he's on a 1-year deal. Like, if you're telling me in a year from now it's going to be Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy, great. Those are not duplicative skill sets in any way, shape, or form. I just think, yeah, I'm going to take advantage of that because I think the risk doesn't outweigh the reward at this point if people are looking to sell and just rid themselves of the problem.
I would say he's a buy, but I have him in every single league, so I can't really buy him anymore. But I'll be honest with you, I'm nervous. Like, I'm really nervous here. And actually, I was just talking to Matt pre-show. Like, I've been buying a lot of Rashee Rice rookie cards. Like, that's been one of the players that I've been targeting because I believe in his talent so much, and I believe in the situation. Like, it was just so clear in the second half of the season, he was their best offensive weapon. And he was a big reason why they won so many of the games down the stretch. And he was fantastic in the playoffs. But I'm wondering if this pattern of behavior isn't going to make the Chiefs do something that would tank his dynasty value, right? I think there was a report out from ESPN today that the Chiefs front office was talking to Rashee Rice about, hey, it's still a possibility that we cut you outright. And now with this with this latest incident, I am worried. And if you go back to his days at SMU, I remember a Bob McGinn piece that came out where one of the scouts said, great player, just not a great dude. Mm-hmm. And that's what concerns me a little bit here is, will the Chiefs ultimately feel like it's not worth the squeeze here? Let's just move on and continue to rebuild our wide receiver situation. I am nervous, Matt.
If they do, that's a terrible sign because, again, I think they're about the most lenient organization out there. So if they were to just flat out cut him, I don't think 20 teams would be banging on the door for his services. I mean, he probably would land somewhere, but on a very short rope, very short leash, and
with a downgraded quarterback, no matter who it is, right?
Then that's what I'm saying. Definitely in a worse situation on the field. So, yeah, I mean, that's the whole. As long as he's a Chief, I'm cool with it. But the second they remove him, I mean, he goes to the bottom of the list. I mean, that's so.
Well, and he's one of those guys. Like, if he's on the Week 1 roster, whether he's suspended or not, I'll be buying. I'm really nervous about like the next 3 months and what happens here, right? Like,
well, I think it's also the most concerning that, this is where he was already in the midst of this very serious legal situation playing out. And then you're still not on your best behavior. That's a huge red flag for me. If he's on the roster, I think probably most people are going to be in the same boat in terms of wanting to buy. So I don't necessarily know, Marcus, that you're going to have the ability to buy him. I think you need to make a decision now before this situation plays out. And I do think that with the question marks, this is probably going to be the lowest his value is if things remain stable. This is probably the cheapest you're ever going to be able to acquire him in a dynasty league.
I almost wish we would just get news right now about a possible suspension. But it sounds like the NFL is going to let the legal process play out, and we know how slowly these things can take. Because I think if the NFL came out and said, "Hey, it's a 5-game suspension for Rashee Rice," I think I'd actually start trying to buy more,
Okay,
honestly.
right, yeah, I can
But
live
if
with it.
it's one of these things where, hey, we're going to hold it over for the whole season, and it could be a 10-game suspension, or he could go to jail, then it's just the unknown really clouds kind of his value. So we'll see. It's a pivotal next 3 months for Rashee Rice, not only for his dynasty value, of course, but for his NFL career. We'll see what happens. We've got another question here about which quarterback are we buying this offseason. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to tell you more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying, Marcus. You've told us about this so many times before, but that's because there's so much good stuff in this game that I have to tell you about. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more that you win together, the more awesome prizes that you unlock. And there's so much to get, like unique stickers that you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces that you can travel the board with, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends when you smash their buildings and heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton of them include their own unique mini games, and there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We are answering your Twitter questions. And this next one from Mike, he wants to know, who is the one quarterback that you all are buying in Dynasty leagues this offseason? Matt, why don't you go first?
I have a million, but I'll just go super quick and rapid fire them. I mean, at the top of the list, the expensive guy is Anthony Richardson. I would rather have him than Herbert, Stroud, Burrow, maybe even Hurts. I think Kyler's a buy. I think he's a year removed from the injury and obviously the Harrison factor. I think Jordan Love is a buy because I'm just convinced he's very good at football. I mean, I wasn't 1 year ago. And I think Dak Prescott might be a buy, although I don't know if he'll be a Cowboy a year from now. I mean, this guy was second in the MVP voting, and everyone thinks he's a bum and he can't win the big one. I think there's a weird misconception with Dak.
Kate, what about you?
I'm going to double down on Kyler Murray here, ranked 10th in fantasy points per game in his return from a torn ACL last year, throwing to nobody. It was Trey McBride and nothing else. I mean, the injury with Marquise Brown, that obviously eliminated his best pass catcher from the field. He was throwing to nobody. Michael Wilson, he was in, everybody was injured last year. And there was, of course, the lack of a true wide receiver one on the depth chart. You throw Marvin Harrison into that mix. Suddenly, I think Michael Wilson, who is a prospect that I really liked, who has had issues staying healthy, if he's your wide receiver too, and you have a Trey McBride who can function as a primary receiving option, I'm loving that prospect here. They have an effective run game. I'm also going to maybe shout out Brock Purdy, who I have not been very high on, but my wife, Michelle Majuk, who is the co-host over on our Locked On Fantasy podcast, go check them out. She's done a really good job of selling me on Brock Purdy this year with their investment in the passing game with, obviously he's kind of on the fringe. He might get this monstrous contract. If he has one more solid year, he's going to get the contract that is finally going to offer him the kind of stability that has had me hesitant about investing to this point. They want to keep Deebo Samuel. They want to keep Brandon Ayuk. They just drafted Ricky Pearsall. I think all indications are that they probably do want to put a little bit more pressure on the passing game. This is a pass first league. Probably a part of the reason that they haven't been able to lock down the big game. I am kind of intrigued by Brock Purdy, and I hate to admit it because I've been kind of one of the holdouts here in terms of his dynasty value.
And I've got two. I can't tell which one's grosser than the next, but I will tell you both. Will Levis, QB 24 right now in Dynasty Leagues. He's so cheap.
Wow.
He's
Yeah.
athletic. And they've done a good job of adding weapons. Now it's
Yes.
DeAndre Hopkins. They brought in Tyler Boyd. They obviously signed Calvin Ridley. They made some improvements on their offensive line, signing Lloyd Cushenberry, drafting J.C. Latham. They also, I think one of the biggest additions was getting Bill Callahan to be their offensive line coach, one of the best offensive line coaches in the league. I expect this Titans offense to be more fun than it's been over the last couple of years. And at QB 24, why not? And the last one, which is extra gross, I'm buying Deshaun Watson. I think the Browns have no choice but to make this offense very Deshaun Watson friendly. And if you look at the weapons on this offense, Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore, David Njoku, and then they drafted Jamari Thrash this year. They drafted Cedric Tillman a year ago. The year before that was David Bell. Like, they're clearly trying to load up on receivers for Deshaun Watson at QB 20, QB 19. Like, I'm willing to buy. And hey, if it doesn't work out this year, I move on. But I mean, this was just a few years ago, one of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the entire NFL. I'm willing to take one more shot here. Matt, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, Watson's so cheap. I understand that. And as you said, it's yucky. It's ugly.
It is yucky.
And they are loading up on receivers. My counter would be they're also loading up on quarterbacks. I mean, they have Jameis Winston, Tyler Huntley, and DTR. You know, like that. Are 4 guys going to make this team? Like, it's weird to go out and sign 2 legit backup quarterbacks. I don't think that's a ringing endorsement for Watson.
It's not, but I mean,
he's going to be the guy.
Yeah, he's going to be the guy. It has to be because of how much they're paying him, right? And how much they have given up for him. So again, I'm not saying it's fun. Nobody's trading for Deshaun Watson and posting on Twitter that you got him. Like, I understand it's not the sexiest quarterback target, but I do think there's some value right now that low. Kate, final thought.
I think there is like also something interesting to be said for the way that they're loading up. Not just loading up on wide receiver. I think the fact that they have not invested in their run game is something that's maybe a little bit telling. Like, I think they want to put a little bit of pressure on this passing game and figure out, like, what is Deshaun Watson? What does he mean for a football team? Because you have Nick Chubb with a devastating season-ending knee injury. It was the second of his career. TBD on like what capacity he is going to be ready to contribute at the start of the season, throughout training camp. They have Jerome Ford, but like, I was thinking that they might walk away with one of these top running backs, like a Trey Benson. I thought they were going to be one of these sneaky teams in the mix, but no, like they brought in Deontay Foreman. Like, they really did not make any significant investments in having any sort of insurance policy in their run game. And I think the fact that they're kind of doubling down on the passing game is an indication that, yeah, I think they want to figure out the Deshaun Watson piece. And I think you probably have at least one season where he is the guaranteed starter. Otherwise, maybe they do just eat all the dead money, right? This is a Browns organization that has not always been the most sensical. We just saw the Broncos willing to move on from Russell Wilson in a unprecedented dead cap situation. Like, I think this is like the put up or shut up season.
It's a make or break here, without a doubt.
Yeah.
We'll see. I'm really curious to see how that Brown situation works out with Deshaun Watson. Again, at QB 20, I'm buying still. All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. We are free and available on all platforms. Go follow Matt on Twitter at Williamson NFL. Go check out his new YouTube channel as well. You can follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Majuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.